All right, welcome everyone, and a good tavach. As we welcome in Ben Zion Cohn, and we welcome in Mel Zachter, Saba, we welcome in Yisrael Fisher, Mordechai Sultan, Stephen Holtzman, A.B. Spry, Bruce Eisenberg, Irving Fishbaum, Nachman Chapler, Shelley Zeitlin, Eddie Chazan, Pesach Siegelman, Moshe Lehman, Chaim Braun, Yitzi Muller, Menachem, Ilya Shutman, Rabbi Kranz, and we have over here now Sandy Grunfeld joining us, and Reb Krause and Reb Berish joining us here, David Helfgott on Kol Aloshin. We are dedicated Lili Nishmas, Esther Basyoni, Yaakov Chaim Ben Abba, Avram Ben Shmuel HaKayin, by Aaron Swade, in loving memory of Chana Bas Shmuel, Freda Bas Shol, by Mark Frankel, for Shlema, for Chana Bas Gittel Esther, Miriam Sar Bas Sipor, by Beir Goldwasser, for Akar Satayv, what Hashem did for his family, and for the Chayla Yisrael, Lefru Shlema, for my Shvar, Vigdaya Ben Rivka, Hayeled Ben Chava, Yehuda Cyril Bas Miriam, and Meir Ben Chaya Sarah. They should have a Refu Shlema, B'Sech Shachela Yisrael. We are starting by Tana Rabbanan, 5 lines from the bottom of Ayin Dalan Amud Beis. Now, as the painstaking operations in Gaza is taking place, very, very dangerous enterprise, we learn for them to succeed and to be safe. Tana Rabbanan, again, 5 lines from the bottom of Daf Ayin Dalan Amud Beis. Tana Rabbanan. Ben Tesha Shana V'Yom Echad, a 9-year-old, that means he's Roy Labia, whether he's a Ger, Ammoni, Umayavi, whether he's a Ger, Ammonite or Moabite, Mitzri, Vadomi, Kusi, the Nosin, or a Chalul, or a Mamzer, Shebo, that has relations with Al Kohenes, Levia, Valbas Yisrael, Paslua, they disqualify her. They disqualify, if she's a Kohenes, she's disqualified from Truma and from the Kahuna, and if she's a Levia or Yisraelis, Rashi says she's disqualified from marrying a Kohen. Rabbi Yossi Aimer, Rabbi Yossi fine-tunes it. Rabbi Yossi Aimer, Kol Shezaroi Pasel, Paisel. If their children are Pasel, then it pasels her. The Kol She'ein Zaroi Pasel, but if their children are not Pasel, ain't a Paisel. Now we're going to see that the Gemara is going to explain that this means that if a Mitzri Sheni sleeps with her, Rabbi Yossi holds she doesn't become Pasel, because the Mitzri Sheni's child is a Mitzri Shlishi and is permitted. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi says that since the Zera is not puzzle, then the woman doesn't become puzzle. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel fine-tunes it further. Kol she'ata noisei bitay, if you could marry the daughter, ata noisei almanusai, you could marry the widow. Kol she'ata noisei bitay, ata noisei almanusai. So we're going to see that what Rabbi Shimon Gamliel adds is that if a ger amayni sleeps with a woman, she is permitted. Why? Because her daughter is permitted, because it's Amayni v'lei Amaynis, Ma'avi v'lei Ma'avis. So Ger Ma'avi, the daughter, would be permitted. And now the Gemara explains what I just told you, as we're holding 3 lines from the top of Ayin Hayamadav, just getting underway, and a busy night here in Rav Moshe Meir Weiss Dafland. My Ika bein Tanakama bein Rabbi Yossi. What's the difference between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yochanan Mitzri Sheni Ika beinai. The difference is a Mitzri Sheni, because according to Rabbi Yossi, a Mitzri Sheni that sleeps with a woman, the child is permitted because it's a Mitzri Shlishi. Oshneim loylam duel mikayin gadol ba'almana. The Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi both compare it to a kohen gadol with almana. The Tanakama Saver ki kohen gadol ba'almana. Ma kohen gadol ba'almana, the bia is also shebi also ba'aveira. Upaisel ba, and therefore it passes the woman. It disqualifies her from truma and from kahuna. Af kol should be also ba'aveira. You're not allowed to sleep with a mitzri sheni. So af kol should be also ba'aveira paisel. But Rabbi Yaisi says, no, we learn out from Almana l'Kohen Gadol, Ki Kohen Gadol ba'Almana, Ma Kohen Gadol ba'Almana, Shezarai Pasul, the seed is Pasul, the seed becomes a Cholol, or Paisel, and therefore it Pasels are Af Kol Shezarai Pasul Paisel, only if the seed is Pasul does it a Pasel her. Lafuke Mitzri Sheni, that excludes if she sleeps with a Mitzri Sheni, because their seed is not Pasul, their seed is a Mitzri Shlishi, which is permitted. Shein Zara Pasul, Damakra. The pasuk says, "Banim asher yavodu lehem dor shlishi." The third generation, yavodu lehem b'kal Hashem, is already allowed to marry into the kal Hashem. Rav Shimon Gamliel, now Rav Shimon Gamliel includes something else. Rav Shimon Gamliel, kol she'ata noisei bita, if you're allowed to marry the daughter, ata noisei almanusa, you're allowed to marry the widow. Because if you're not allowed to marry the daughter, so this, of course, it will say that if she sleeps with a ger Moavi or a ger Ammoni, since you're allowed to marry the daughter, because you're allowed, like Rus Hamayaviyah, you're allowed to marry the daughter of a Moabite or an Ammonite. Therefore, he holds that it doesn't passel her from Kuna. My ikabein Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. What's the difference between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel? Amar ula ger amoni moyavi ikabeinai. And again, their difference is how you compare it to an almana l'kohen gadol. Ushneim loylam dua elam kohen gadol ba'almana. The question is how you compare it to a kohen gadol with almana. Rabbi Yossi says ki kohen gadol ba'almana, ma kohen gadol ba'almana shezarei pasel, that some of its seed is pasul. Upaisel, shezarei pasul, upaisel, the children of Almana Kohen Gadol are chalolim, af kol shezarei pasul, paisel. And therefore that includes a ger Ammoni or a Moavi, because the male children are pasul. Reb Shem Gamliel, no, it has to be ki kohen gadol ba'almana, ma kohen gadol ba'almana, that all the children are pasul. All the children, both male and female, are pasul. Well, that excludes a ger Ammoni ma'ami. That afkol shezar apostle, afilu nekevos, even the females. Lafuke ger Ammoni moavi, that excludes the ger Ammoni moavi. The nekevos have ksheres bekal, because the females are permitted to marry into the kol. Damamar Ammoni v'loy Ammonis. It's only the male Ammoni and not a female. Moavi v'loy Moavis. That's why Rus Hamayaviyah was permitted. Now, Rav Chisda, as we just started getting underway, as we welcome in Harrison Kletzel, we welcome in Gedalia Engel, who I guess he forgot our address over here. It's Two Valley Stream, Gedalia. It really is. It's not that far. You just come out of your house, make a left. Avram Schenkman is joining us. Shimon Klein has come on. Rabbi Kranz, Moshe Jackanen. It's good to have everybody join us. Says the Gemara, and over here we're being held by Reb Krause and Reb Berish holding the fort over here. Amar Rav Chisda, Hakol Moedim ba'almonas Isa. Everybody agrees that a widow of a mixed dough shepsula lekahuna. Now this is a ganze story. Let me tell you the story over here, as Marshall bites into his first Frankfurter of the week. He looks, Marshall, I would say, looks well rested from Shabbos. It's good. All that. All that bourbon, got it. You look well rested from Shabbos, Marshall. Marshall has Kiddushin Shabbos on him. I got to tell you, it looks good. All those drumettes that he made.
You should have been here to try them. Those were great.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. They had better be. You missed Daf Yomi to do it. Says the Gemara. What's an almanas Isa? What happened over here is that Chatzkel was married to Sarah, and Chatzkel threw Sarah a get. and it was a suffix whether it was closer to her and she was divorced, or it wasn't. So she was a suffix grusha. Then Chatzkel died. Chatzkel died, and now Sarah could get married. Sarah went ahead and married a Kohen, which she shouldn't have done because she's a suffix grusha. But Sarah went ahead and married a Kohen, and they had a child. That child was Marshall. Now Marshall, therefore, is a suffix chalal, because if she was a grusha, then he's a chalal. If she wasn't a grusha, the get never was closer to her, so then she was just a widow, then she was allowed to marry the Kohen, so then Marshall is not a chalal. And now Marshall sleeps with a woman. And our question is, what's the status of this woman? So everybody agrees, since Marshall is a suffix chalal, and it's a suffix doraisa, so she's puzzled. So
She's a lucky woman, she got me.
Because man mekel bahani tanai, who's the most lenient of all the three opinions we had above? Reb Shimon Gamliel. If you can marry the daughter, you can marry the widow. So since Marshall is a suffix chalal, their daughter would be a suffix forbidden, because suffix deraisa is l'chumra. However, and therefore l'mute, what's this coming to exclude? Which case? L'mute almanas isa, that this wife that slept with Marshall, shepsula lakuna, she's pasal lakuna. However, that's not universal. Lafuki, to exclude, lafuki medahani tanoi, to exclude these tanoi. Ditnan, heyed Reb Yeshua v'Reb Yehuda ben Beseir almanas isa, that this woman that slept with Marshall, who is a suffix chalal, sheksheira lakuna. Why? My timer, this is very interesting. Have a svek sveka. This is an extended suffix. This is a different shot in svek sveka than usual. Really, this is only one suffix, because it's a suffix whether the get was closer to her or not. If the get was closer to her, she's a divorcee, and then when her husband died and she married the Kohen, then Marshall is a chalal. And then when Marshall sleeps with the woman, he passes her. It's all one suffix. But it's a svek sveka, means it's a svek sveka that extends through generations. It's not a recent suffix. It's a prolonged suffix. And therefore, such a svek sveka, they hold, is lakula. Okay, we're at the two dots now, just getting underway, covering a lot of ground already on this Motzoi Shabbos. Motzoi Shabbos Parashas Vayera. A very auspicious week. On this week, we are going to finish Seder Nashim. Obviously, Marshall tells me that he didn't do it. Okay. You didn't do it, Marshall. Okay, he didn't do it. He says he wants to get back to room 208. Okay, it's okay, Marshall. We'll use somebody else. As we welcome in Aaron Swade, who's joining us in time for the two dots, 5 lines from the beginning of the intermediate lines on Daf Ayin Hey Amud Aleph. As I said, an auspicious week this week because we finish Seder Nashim. Seder Nashim. Remember, we are already past half of Shas, right? We're learning the second half of Shas now. So it's really very exciting. And Moshe Jacqueline has just arrived in Shul over here to hold the fort because he lives closer than Gedalia and Saba.
Rabbi, I thought we were starting 9:15.
You thought wrong. You're not on the chat?
I am, but I don't really look at it much. I depend on what you're saying, sure, in class.
Well, I said right before we ended on Thursday night, 8:45.
I must have misunderstood you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right. Bring a note next time. So now, vadoyin bevadoyin mutter. We said that it's the opinion of Reb Elazar or Reb Eliezer. There's a shaila in the Girsa over here, and the Masoret Shas, the Girsa is Reb Elazar, that vadoyin bevadoyin mutter. A mamzer is permitted with a mamzer. But a vadai with a suffix, that means a mamzer with a shtuki, or a shtuki with a shtuki, or a shtuki with a sufi, they're all usr. Now that makes sense. I mean, that's the most sensible opinion, because a shtuki means we don't know who the father is, so one shtuki might be a mamzer, and one shtuki might be a kosher. So how could they marry each other? And for that matter, how could a shtuki marry a vadai? The shtuki might be kosher and the vadai is a mamzer. How could a kosher marry a mamzer? So that's the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav, halacha to Rabbi Elazar. The halacha is that way. Ki amrisa kamei de Shmuel, when this was said before Shmuel, Amali, he said to me, that's not the case. Hillel taught, Asar Yuchsin Alu Mabavel, 10 different types of genealogical classes came up from Balav. The Kulan Mutarans, and they're all mutter to marry one with another. Obviously, by the way, when we say they're all mutter, that cannot be literal. Because a Kayan, of course, can't marry a mamzer. A Yisrael can't marry a mamzer. So it can't mean that they're all mutter, but it means all of the blemished classes all are allowed to marry one with the other, which means that a shtuki can marry a mamzer, a shtuki can marry an asufi. But Amrit halacha Rebbe Elazar, and you say that the law follows Rebbe Elazar. And again, what would be the rationale to say that a shtuki can marry a mamzer? After all, a shtuki means we don't know who the father is, but the father might be a kosher. So how could a shtuki marry a mamzer? So we said the rationale behind that opinion is that only a kal vadai is not allowed to marry a mamzer, but a kal safek, which a shtuki is, a kal safek is allowed to marry a mamzer, right? So we have two opinions. So here we have a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Rav says that sveikis cannot marry vadais, and Shmuel says they can. Says the Gemara, and now we have a stira. The Rami de Rav ad Rav, we have a contradiction Rav on Rav. The Rami de Shmuel ad Shmuel, and we have a contradiction Shmuel on Shmuel. The Itmar Arusa she'ibra. If a woman, we'll call her Sarah, was pregnant. Now she was engaged to Chatzkel. Right? She was engaged to Chatzkel, and now we find her pregnant. Now, an engaged person doesn't really sleep with her until he has chuppah. But now she's pregnant. So, and we don't know who the father is. So Rav Amar Havlad Mamzer, Rav says we go after the majority of the men. And the majority of men are forbidden to her. So he says the child's a mamzer. V'Shmuel Amar Havlad Shtuki. And Shmuel says, no, the child is a shtuki. So Rav Amar Havlad Mamzer. Now, of course, the child is a doubt. And yet, Umuta b'mamzeres. Is muta b'mamzeres. Now, that's completely different what Rav said earlier. Rav said that a suffix is not allowed to marry a vadai. Now here, this child from this pregnant woman, we don't know who the father is, and yet we say it is allowed to marry a mamzeres. V'Shmuel amar havlad shtuki, v'asim mamzeres. But Shmuel said before that if it's a case of a suffix is allowed to marry a vadai. So the Gemara says, well, the only way out of this is to switch around the names. Eipach, Rav Amar Vlad Shtuki, V'Shmuel Amar Vlad Mamzer. Okay, but even if you switch it around, why do we have to teach it twice? As we welcome in Richard Rosenzweig, giving us the pleasure of having him join us on our Zoom family. Welcome, Richard. And we want to welcome in also Joseph Isaac Korf, who's joining us as well on Facebook, together with Harrison Kletzel and Sandy Grunfeld. It's good to have 28 Zoomers here on this beginning of our Motzi Shabbos marathon. So the Gemara asks, Tarte Lamali. Even if you switch around the names, why did they have to say, first Rav have to say in our Mishnah that the halacha is that, like Rabbi Eliezer, that a vadai with a suffix is aser, while Shmuel says that a vadai with a suffix is mutter, and then argue again in this case of the arusa that got pregnant? Tzricha. Because if we would say that Rav says that she's forbidden, the shtuki is forbidden with a mamzer, B'hakam Rav, in the case of our Mishnah, it's talking about where the woman wasn't engaged. And since the woman wasn't engaged, even though we don't know who the father is, the majority of people are kashatar. Mishum derived ksherim etzla. And since the majority of people are kashatar, therefore we say this child is forbidden to a mamzer because it's likely a kosher child. Aval Hassan, but the case of the Rusa that gave birth, the Rusa that gave birth, all majority of men are forbidden because she's a married woman. The Rav Psulan Etzla, Ema Mighty Shmuel, that's probably a mamzer, and it's allowed to marry another mamzer. V'iyat marbahach, and if we say, in the case where it's Rusa that became pregnant, and there Rav says that this child is forbidden to a mamzer, that's because we could say it's probably from the fiancé. It's probably they couldn't wait till the chuppah. They're young, their hormones are high. But how come a Rav that the child is forbidden with a mamzer? Misham diikalamit laba'aris. But if it's a shtuki, maybe there he says that since it's an act of immorality, that the child is permitted to a mamzer because it's probably not a good child. Tzricha. We don't switch around Rav and Shmuel. Or my mamzer to come a Rav, and when Rav says that the arusa that's Ibra, that the child is a mamzer, he doesn't mean that the child is permitted to marry another mamzer. He just means the child is also to marry a Yisrael. La mutima mamzeres, because he holds that a suffix is not allowed to marry a mamzer. Ella da asa babas Yisrael. We say that if she has a child when she's an arusa, that child is also to marry Yisrael because it might be a mamzer. B'Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel says avlat shtuki. Again, the asa babas Yisrael. So then the Gemara says that then Rav and Shmuel is saying the same thing. Ihachi hainu de Rav. We don't allow the child to marry kuna. So the Gemara says that can't be the pshita. Ashtem medin Yisrael mishaskin like we don't even allow him to marry Yisrael medin kuna b'bay. Elamai shtuki shemishaskin oisay menichsei aviv. That means since we don't know who the father is, we don't allow him to take the Yerusha from the fiancé. Says Gemara Pshita, that's obvious. Miyadina navu amanu. We don't know who the father is. Why should he get a Yerusha? Leitzricha de tafis. It's talking about where he grabbed the Yerusha. So he grabbed the Yerusha. We might think that we can't take it away from him. We can't take it away from him unless we prove he's not his son. Kamashmon, that we take it away from him. The Iba is saying, shtuki beduki. Shtuki means that Shmuel says in the case where the Arusa became pregnant, we investigate, we ask her. Shabayt kinasimai, and if if she says I slept with a kosher, meaning that she slept with her fiancé, nemenes. Says the Gemara, Kaman, Rabbi Gamliel, like Rabbi Gamliel, we taught from the Mishnah in Ksubis that if we see her pregnant, we ask her, Mativa shel ubazeh, and she says, we believe her, if she was pregnant, what's the nature of this child? And she says, it's from so-and-so, and he's a meyuchis. Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Eliezer, I'm a nemenis. Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Eliezer says she's believed. Rabbi Shua, I'm a nemenis. And Shmuel already says the halach is like Rabbi Gamliel. I'm Rabbi Yehuda, I'm a Shmuel, halach Rabbi Gamliel. So the Gemara says, tzricha. The ima hasam, because if we say the ima hasam, if we say the case of if we say the case over there in Ksuvas, that's because this woman wasn't engaged. So the majority of people are permitted to her. But over here, the Rav Psula Metzla, where she's engaged, so the majority of men are puzzled. I might think we don't believe her. Tzricha. Tanya, now we're going to open up a new conversation. And the conversation is a kusi that marries a kusis. The kusim are a mysterious breed. These people, Sancherib Melech Ashur had a military strategy that whenever he conquered a country, he moved the people out of the country so that they shouldn't be able to regroup and have home team advantage. So when he conquered Eretz Yisrael, he took the 10 tribes and moved them out of the Shomron. And he brought people from Kusa and he moved them into the Shomron. And they were attacked by lions and they converted. And there is a whole question if their conversion was sincere or it was only because of the fear of the lions. So there's a question if Kusim are Geirei Arayis and therefore they're really Goyim, or they're Geirei Emes. That's question number one. Number two, the Kusim, according to some opinions, were not careful in halachas. So here, the Gemara teaches us, Tanya, v'chein Rebbe Lazar aimer kusi lo yisa kusis. A kusi should not marry a kusis. Now, my time, what's the reason? Because Amar Rav Yosef asu kiger la'achar asara dairis. You see, in the kusim, there is a question that some of them might be mamzerim. So you'll say, so what? They're gerim. And kal gerim ikre kal. But it's the opinion of Rabbi Lazar that once a ger is 10 generations a ger, so then he's not allowed to marry a mamzer. Because once he's 10 generations a ger, people might look at him as a regular Yisrael, and then infer that a Yisrael is allowed to marry a mamzeres. So the Tana, my time, Amar Rav Yosef, Asua ki ger la'achar asara dairos. It makes them like a ger after 10 generations. The Tanya ger ad asara dairos, mutar b'mamzeres, is permitted to marry mamzeres. Mikan ve'elach, since people might not know that he's a ger, also b'mamzeres. V'yeshayimim, others say that it doesn't have to be 10 generations. It's actually yishtaka shem avodas kachavim mimenu, until it's forgotten that the person it's a family from Goyim. Amalei Abaye says, it's not a good comparison. Mi dummy. Hasam ger yashin umamzeres kadasha. If you have a 12th generation ger and a new mamzeres, people will forget that he's a ger and come to say that a Yisrael is allowed to marry a mamzeres. Amar bar Yisrael the kadosh mamzeres. But they're both kusim. They're known to be kusim. So even if there's mamzeres, everybody knows that the kusim are gerim, and they're not going to make a mistake. Ella says to Gemara, the reason is as follows. Ki as Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Lazar Savala Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Lazar holds like Rabbi Yishmael, And v'savala Rabbi Akiva, and holds like Rabbi Akiva. So let's see. This is an interesting web the Gemara is going to weave over here. Rabbi Lazar savala Rabbi Yishmael the Amar Kusim Geri Arayasem. So that sets the story. Kusim Agoyim, because their conversion wasn't a good conversion. It was only mepachad arayas. But Rabbi Yishmael savala Rabbi Akiva, and he also holds like Rabbi Akiva. The Amar Oived Kechavim ve'Eved Abal Bas Yisrael Havlan Mamzer. He holds that a guy and an Eved that sleeps with a Bas Yisrael, the child is a Mamzer. So what happens over here? Throughout the generations, Kusim intermingled with Jewish girls. So if a Kusi intermingled with a Jewish girl, he's a ger. He's a guy. Because the Kusim we said are gay arayis, so he's a guy, and the girl is a Bas Yisrael, and they're over, since she's sleeping with a guy, is over the lav of Leisis Schattenbaum, and this is Rabbi Kiva who holds that there's a mamzer mechayve lavim, and therefore over Kechav me'eved abba Bas Yisrael avlad mamzer. So when you have a Kusi and a Kusis, one of them, the girl could be a mamzer, and the kusi could be a guy. And a mamzer is a yid, is not allowed to marry a guy. Says the Gemara, but wait a second. Umi savala Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Akiva. Does Rabbi Yishmael hold that there's a mamzer mechayve lavin? V'amar Rabbi Yechim Mishim Rabbi Yishmael Menayin lo ivi k'chav me'evet shabal kenes v'alavia v'alabas Yisrael. How do you know that a guy or an Eved that sleeps with a Kohen, a Sylvia or a Bas Yisrael, that they passel her from Kahuna, Shepaslua, Shenemar Bas Koyin Kisiya Almano Grusha, a Bas Koyin that becomes a widow or a divorcee, and she has no children, she has no children, so she could return back to eat the truma of her father's house. But that's only if she sleeps with somebody that has a din of widowhood and divorcee. But if she sleeps with a guy or an Eved, which is not in the Torah of widowhood or divorce, there's no din of widowhood and divorce by an Eved or an Eved, she doesn't go back to eat the truma of her parents' home. But if Rabbi Yishmael will hold that an Eved produces a mamzer, if she produces a mamzer, obviously she doesn't need truma. If she produces a child that's a mamzer, do we need a pasuk to tell her that she becomes disqualified by sleeping with the husband? Ella, tweak that. It's not that Rabbi Yishmael holds like Rabbi Akiva. It's Rabbi Lazar holds like Rabbi Yishmael, and he also holds like Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yishmael doesn't have to hold like Rabbi Akiva. El Rabbi Lazar savala Rabbi Yishmael, the Amar Kusim Geri Arayis, and v'savala Rabbi Akiva, and also holds like Rabbi Akiva, the Amar Oived Kechavim ve'Eved Abal Bas Yisrael Avlad Mamzer. So now the Gemara says, you can't say Rabbi Lazar holds like Rabbi Akiva, and quoting something that we're just learning now in Mishnah Yomis. Umi savala Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Akiva. Does Rabbi Elazar hold that there's a mamzer mechayve lavin? I v'amar Rabbi Elazar afal pi shenechleku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel b'tzarais. Even though Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue about a tzaras ever, remember we said that if Reuven marries Sarah, Shimon's daughter, he marries his niece, and he has another wife, Dinah, so Beis Shammai holds when Reuven dies childless. Sarah is pater because it's Shimon's daughter. But Beis Shammai holds Shimon could be miyabim the tzara. He can miyabim the co-wife. While Beis Hillel says that the co-wife is also pater because tzaras ever is pater. So even though Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue with tzaras, moedim, they both agree she'ein mamzer el misha isurei iser erva. There's only a mamzer from somebody that's an iser erva, like a sister or wife's sister, v'adish karis, with a penalty of karis. There's no mamzer mechayv lavim. So you see the Rebbe Lazar doesn't hold like Rabbi Akiva. Ella, says the Gemara, we're now going to get the lowdown on the story about Kusi. Eliki also Ravin Rab Chia bar Abba Rab Yochanan. When Ravin arrived, he said in the name of Rab Chia bar Abba, in the name of Rab Yochanan. V'imrei la, and others say Rab Abba bar Zavda Rab Chanina. Rab Abba bar Zavda in the name of Rab Chanina. V'imrei la Rab Yaakov bar Yidi Rab Yishuv and Levi. Shalosh machloikis bedavar. There's a three-way machloikis in what the story is with Kusim. Rashi says with the Kusim that intermingled with Kohanim. That's the way Rashi learns. Bekusim beKohanim amura bekra shenitmu mahem. That Kusim intermingled with Kohanim. Rabbi Shmuel Savar, Kusim geri aroyaseng. The Kusim are going. The Kohanim that mixed with them were not scrupulous Kohanim. We'll see they were the bad apples. The Kohanim shenitmu behem, the Kohanim that intermingled with him, Kohanim psulin hayu. They were disqualified Kohanim. How do we know that there's a low group, a unworthy group amongst the Kohanim? Shenemar v'yasu lahem b'ktsosam, and the Kusim made from part of them Kohanei Bamais, Kohanim on their altars. Now these were Bamais, which were illegal Bamais, because it was at the time of the Beis HaMikdash, and at the time of Beis HaMikdash already private Bamais were forbidden. V'amar Rabba bar bar Chana, when it says Miktsaisam, it means Am Rabbi Yochanan min hakoitzim sheba'am, from the thorns of the nation. And therefore, we have that Kohanim slept with Goyim, and Kohanim that slept with Goyim, right, the children are disqualified. Even if you hold Eved V'Eved Kacham Mabah Abbas Yisrael, the Vlad is not a mamzer, but the child is definitely puzzled. Umishum Hachi Paslino, and therefore they were disqualified. So that's one view of the Kusim that intermingled with the Kohanim. Now,
what does this have to do with Kusim and Kusis, though? Aren't we talking about that?
Well, we're going to. Taisus talks about that in length. I'm skirting a little bit around it, but we're going to infer from here that if they're gerei arayis, so then that's why a kusi can't marry a kusis, because if therefore one of them might not be a sincere ger and one might be a sincere ger, so they can't marry each other.
They're gerei arayis, so the goyim.
Again, that's initially. If later on, throughout the generations, one of them might have been sincerely converted, they can't marry the other because they might not have been sincerely converted. Now, Rabbi Kiva Savar, Rabbi Kiva holds, Kusim Gerei Emes, that the Kusim were sincere converts. And therefore the Kohanim shenitmu b'hem, and the Kohanim that mixed with them, Kohanim ksherim ayu, were kosher Kohanim. Shenema v'yasu lehem miktsoisam, they made from amongst them Kohani Bamas, v'amar Rabba bar bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan min habechirim sheba'am, from the choice one of the people. In other words, these were the favorable Kusim. The element Neima Osram. So then why did they ask the Kusim? There was a problem with the Kusim. They interpreted Psukim. They didn't accept Torah Shebal Peh. And they interpreted Psukim literally. And they went ahead, when Reuven is married to Sarah, and Reuven dies childless, so there's a law that Sarah cannot get married until she gets Yibam or Chalitza. That law is Loisia Eishes Hameis Hachutza Leish Zar. The Kusim, with their warped interpretation, they darshaned Loisia eishes hameis hachutza liish zar. She could only not marry somebody else if she was chutza, if she was only engaged to Ruvain. But if she was married to Ruvain, there's no chiyuv of yibam and chalitza. So, the mibnei ma'asim, mibnei shoya miyabmim esarusais. What they did is they said that Sarah has to be miyabm Shimon only if she was only engaged to Ruvain, because that's what the pasuk in that kruma way says. If she was outside Ruvain, she was only engaged, so she can't marry an ish zar. She has to do yibam. But upoitrim es hanesuins, and they pattered those that are married. My darshe, what did they expound? If she's outside, if she's an oris only, li'izar. Hak the yosva chutza, he loisia li'izar. Aval hak the lo yosva chutza, but those that are not chutza, if she was married to Ruvain, then tia li'izar. She can marry somebody. So when she went ahead and married, in reality, she was over the lav of Loisia because a married one does need to have yibum, and therefore it's going according to Rabbi Kiva l'tamei da'amar yesh mamzer mechayve lavan, that there's a mamzer from chayve lavan, and therefore the kusim now are intermingled with mamzerus. Okay, we're going to stop here now just to turn over